So right now in America, most cities use property tax to generate revenue for their budgets. The problem is that the way that this property tax is calculated actually disincentivizes building and leads to less housing. Let me explain why. So currently the way that we calculate property tax is we take the structure, so in this case a house, and let's say it's worth $100, and we add that value to the value of the land, right? So let's say the land is worth $100 as well, right? So in total, they'll both be worth $200, and your property tax is going to be 1% of $200. Pretty straightforward. That's the way we already do it. So let's look at how that works in cities, right? So imagine there are two pieces of land, right? Piece of land A, piece of land B. They're both taxed at $10,000, right? Because they're exactly the same in every way. So let's imagine a developer buys square of land A, and then they build an affordable housing complex on that square of land, right? An 80-story affordable housing complex that's going to house teachers, bartenders, people who really need housing, right? This is a really good thing to do with this square of land. The problem is that when they do this, the value of the property is going to go way up, right? So the tax is also going to go way up. Instead of paying $10,000 in tax, they're now paying $1 million in tax. And you might say, well, that's fair. They have a big building on it, right? They should be taxed more. Yeah, but this $1 million is going to be passed down to the residents of this tower, right? The developer is not just going to pay it on their own. They're going to charge people more to live here because they're paying a higher tax. Now let's look at what happens with square of land B. Remember, this square of land is exactly the same, right? Just as valuable. A developer buys this piece of land and they build a parking lot. Just a parking lot. They pave it, that's it. So now you can park your cars there. Great. So they have done basically nothing to improve this square of land. And remember, this square of land is exactly the same in value as this square of land, right? The thing is developer B didn't improve it at all, so their tax bill doesn't go up, right? Because the property that they own is not more valuable now. They're only paying $11,000 a year in tax because literally all they did was just pave it. They chose to use the land inefficiently, and they're being rewarded for that behavior, right? This is why if you go to downtown Houston, you see a bunch of parking lots because they're incredibly cheap tax-wise. If you build a parking lot in downtown Houston, you're not going to be paying a high tax bill. If you build an apartment complex, you better bet your ass you are. Okay, so now let's take a look at a better system, right? So this is called a land value tax, okay? In this system, you only tax the value of the land. You're taxing the potential of the land, okay? Okay, so we got square of land A, square of land B. And you'll notice at the outset, okay, these two squares of land are empty. They're already being taxed $500,000 each. And that's because these are very valuable pieces of land, right? These are in downtown Houston, we'll say. You could do a lot with this land. So they're being taxed very highly. Developer A builds an apartment complex. They're still being taxed $500,000. The tax is the same. It stays the same. No matter what you do with the land, the tax stays the same, so you can do whatever you want with it without worrying about your tax bill going up. Developer B buys the square of land. They build their parking lot. Their tax bill, still $500,000. Guess what's going to happen in this situation, okay? Guess what's going to happen? Developer A is going to do well. They have an apartment complex. This is a big money generator, right? So they're using the land efficiently. Developer B, not so much, right? You're building a parking lot and you're getting taxed $500,000 a year for it. This business is not going to survive, okay? They're going to go bankrupt or they're going to have to sell the land. And that's a good thing, right? Because you want people who are going to build apartment complexes. This apartment complex could have a parking structure underneath it that has more parking than this parking lot in it, okay? So what the land value tax does, right, is it rewards developers who use the land efficiently, right? Because remember, in this situation, developer A, they're getting taxed $500,000 less than they were in the previous situation. They're using the land well, and they're being rewarded for it. This developer is using the land poorly, and they're going to have to sell it or go bankrupt, right? And that's what we want to happen. Now, this is all probably sounding kind of foreign to you, so let me describe some of the benefits of this system, right? So remember, we've got this $500,000 land tax on both plots of land. This is plot of land A, this is plot of land B. What's going to happen is two towers are going to have to be built on this land, right? To justify the price of the tax, you're going to have to build something very valuable on the land. This tower could be, it could be a parking structure. If you like parking, fine. I don't like parking, but if you like parking, fine. This could be a parking structure, okay? But what's going on is the land in both of these situations is being used more efficiently, okay? So we're getting more value out of it. The city is benefiting more from it. The people who live in the city are benefiting more from it. So you're gonna have more apartments, and that's gonna lead to lower costs, right? Because if you increase the supply in a system, the prices go down, okay? You're also gonna have more green space, right? You might say, Jack, that doesn't make sense. You're talking about building 2 towers. Why would there be more green space if you're building 2 towers instead of 1? Well, remember, this tower is replacing a parking lot. It's not replacing green space. And second of all, think about what happens here, okay? You've got 2 towers now. Everybody who wants to live in the city, everybody who wants to come live in downtown Houston, be close to their job or whatever, can come and get a nice apartment. That's going to reduce urban sprawl, right? I know, for instance, in the place that I'm from in San Francisco, there are a lot of people who commute from hours away every day just to come to their office in San Francisco. This would totally solve that problem. Now you might say, like, Jack, this all makes sense, but it's sounding a little bit like Reaganomics-y, you know? Like, is this actually going to help working people? Well, let me talk to you about one other aspect of this. If you go to the Seacliff district of San Francisco, where I'm from, you'll see there are these very, very large mansions, right? They're sitting on very, very valuable pieces of land right by the ocean, you know, and those pieces of land could hold apartment complexes, right? A lot of people could be living there, but instead it's just one person, right? In the regular property tax system, this mansion might have a lower tax than this low-income housing development, because the mansion is a smaller structure, right? The low-income housing development, even though it's sitting on a smaller square of land, right? It's using the land more efficiently. It might have a higher property tax because it's a very large building. Now, that doesn't make sense, right? Because the owner of this apartment building is providing housing to hundreds of people, right? Whereas this mansion is just providing housing to one person. This rich person is not paying their fair share, okay? Under a land value tax, this rich person would be forced to pay the same amount or more than this apartment complex. And that would allow these very, very valuable squares of land that these mansions sit on to be developed for more people to live there. So why isn't everybody doing this, right? It sounds like a good system. How come you don't see it in more towns? Well, to begin with, the problem is it would cause a major market disruption. If you were to institute a land value tax somewhere, some people's home values would go way up and other people's home values would go way down. And we don't really want to tank the value of people's homes. In America, most people have all their equity tied up in their homes. So this is kind of a bad outcome. You don't want instability. The second problem is that there's some people who may be living in extremely valuable areas, but not being taxed as if they're living in an extremely valuable area. And those people would probably have to move. And that's kind of a bad outcome as well. You know, like, you don't want some grandma who's been sitting in her house for 60 years and it just happens to be downtown. You don't want to force her out of her house so that you could build an apartment complex. Yes, it would be more efficient for everyone, but it's kind of a bad look. Housing should be cheap. It should be incredibly cheap. It should be sold for the cost of building it plus a little bit more, just like anything else. And that is not the system that we currently have. But in order for that to happen, we have to treat it like anything else, which is that it becomes less valuable as time goes on. As long as housing is something that people invest in, it will always be expensive because it's a limited resource. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. You have to pick one. A house being a depreciating asset might sound kind of scary to you, but you have to remember that it's going to be way cheaper. So you buy a home and you know it's a depreciating asset. It's much cheaper because of that, you know, orders of magnitude cheaper. And you're not tied to it, right? If the housing market crashes, you're not screwed. If you want to move, you can. If you want to expand because you know your family grows, it's easy to do that. Basically, this just lubricates the whole system, so it's much easier to do anything related to housing. Just tax land, baby.